Welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast, where we address the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. This is the time, my friends, for a deeper renewal of your Christian vocation. Come and enter into the freedom of Christ that allows you to be the person you were created to be, because there's an amazing, awesome, exciting next season of life waiting for you.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. It is great to be here with you. I'm Curtis. I'm here with my fellow host, Karen.
Hi, everyone. Awesome to see you today.
And we're here with a very special guest, Lisa Mladinich. And she is a wonderful coach. She's a Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach, a life coach certified. She's on the faculty of the Professional Coaching Institute and trains coaches. She's a best-selling, award-winning author, a media host. She's been on EWTN, Relevant Radio, Catholic TV, Sirius XM, many other places you've heard of and you haven't heard of. She's been around the networks of the world. And she has a wonderful micro podcast, Talent Talk Tuesdays. It's a short weekly lesson on living powerfully in your God-given talents. And her website is Wonderfully Made 139. So the number is 139, Wonderfully Made 139. So it is such an honor, Lisa, to welcome you to the Catholic Midlife Podcast.
Oh, well, I'm just thrilled to be here, Curtis and Karen. I love what you're doing. I love the way you have conversations with such honor, and really appreciate you too. So thanks, and hello to everybody listening.
Yes, we are super excited for this conversation. And really, this has come out of some of our last few podcast episodes where we've been talking about really leaning into making your unique and very important contribution to the world and to the kingdom, and just encouraging you to move forward into that next phase with energy and really leaning on the Lord and the Holy Spirit. And so it just seemed like a perfect time to have Lisa come on and talk to us about using our strengths as midlife Catholics and all that can do for us.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So Lisa, what's the Catholic kind of angle to using your strengths? I mean, is this just another personality thing? Or, is it just for me? Is it all about service? I'm in middle age. I'm trying to grow, trying to be a faithful, wonderful Catholic. What is this thing about strengths?
I would say primarily, and this is really important to hold, it's for getting closer to God. The designer, the master who creates you, weaves wisdom and beauty and power into your being. And it is not egotistical to appreciate the work of the master. In fact, he's created pathways for you to encounter him in your own being. And so I would start there, that if every day you said, Lord, bless my gifts, help me to bless others through my gifts, bless me through my gifts, and also help me to meet you there in my gifts, in my weaknesses, in my needs. In fact, understanding your strengths helps you understand your weaknesses and the places that you typically fall, and can be places where you examine your conscience, where you ask God to pour in healing and help. And the other aspect is this. We often hear the word vocation, and we just kind of glaze over because honestly, at midlife especially, most of us already know what that means, and we're just not really listening anymore. Or we hear personal vocation, and maybe we lean in just a little bit because maybe we haven't studied that one so much. But the idea is your big V vocation, marriage, religious life, clergy, all of that's that big call. And it kind of gives you the pool you swim in. But your swim lane is your personal vocation. So how has God woven you together in a purposed, tender way that he delights in and speaks truth into? And the problem in the church today, with all the darkness and all the division, is that people don't know who God says they are. And looking at your own design is a starting point for understanding, who does God say that I am? And in that, a lot of false beliefs and false shame and woundedness start to lose their grip. And we start to step into more confidence in God's love for us and in the gifts that he has ordained that we live out. So I would say most important of all is that relationship with God and what his beautiful design says. I often, and I want to make t-shirts someday, discover the divine in your design. He's right there.
That's a beautiful, beautiful phrase. I'm wondering, Lisa, could you give us just an example of how those strengths really break open the understanding of who we are and what God has for us?
Oh, sure, sure. I'll tell you because I'm talking about these kinds of things on my podcast these days, is that when I first had that book that you mentioned in the bio that won an award, it was a bestseller. That was in 2015. I was doing a lot of traveling for speaking, and the enemy got in my head. You just like being the center of attention. What a know-it-all. These really negative, taunting voices that I didn't recognize as the enemy at the time. And so I kept falling to my knees before getting up to speak to people. I'd be in my hotel room saying, Lord, I'm an empty cup. Fill me and I'll pour it out. I just had to take myself to a place of abandonment because he'd be taunting me right before I got up to the podium. You're boring. They're going to laugh. They're going to say, what is she doing here? She doesn't even belong here. Imposter syndrome stuff. But it was really malicious. And so when I finally got trained as a coach and then Gallup trained, was really excited to look at my talents through the lens of my Catholic faith. And when I started to look at them, I was like, oh my gosh, Lord, thank you for leading me on this path to just see this basic information. You have wired me for research, for sharing, teaching, for igniting others into motion, for taking ideas and turning them into action, for deep thought and reflection, for sharing those things, for winning others over to the kingdom, for speaking powerful core values in a talent theme called belief. Like my top talents so clearly provided the framework for everything that I was passionate about. And that's when that voice never could speak to me again. If it even began to whisper, I could ignore it with ease. And it was just a place of freedom for me. And so then I could not only appreciate the designer for giving me things to do that I loved, that I needed to be ashamed of, that I could give to him, keep confessing my sins and checking my ego at the door and being real with people and being vulnerable and risking letting them see my imperfections. Yes, to show up real the way Jesus shows up real, the way Mary shows up real. So to be in that place, yes, to be kind of soul naked before the Lord and trust in him to do all the heavy lifting, but to be completely in this humble boldness of standing confidently in what God made and called good. Genesis 1:31. He made everything and then called it very good.
I just really love what you said, Lisa, because I do believe that so often we get just sunk into kind of a false humility about, oh, it's ego to accept my strengths or to admit that I do this thing really well and that I should be doing more of it. And so it was just a very beautiful example you just gave of how actually we're called to not just accept, but to really embrace the way that God has made us and the purpose that he has in making us that way.
Yeah, and our talents need to be redeemed. Oh, excuse me, Curtis. Did you want to pop in there?
Well, so Lisa, I mean, you were listing your strengths with humility, and I was kind of like, oh, great, she's like St. Paul Jr. or something. St. Paul has all the gifts.
I'll tell you my weaknesses next, and you'll be disabused of that very rapidly.
And so, I mean, we could feel like, well, I have talents, but come on, I'm just sort of average. So what is it you find about people? I mean, what do you do if you just sort of average?
Oh my gosh. That's such a fabulous question on so many levels that my brain just popcorned in about 10 different directions. So I'm going to trust the Lord to guide me on this one. Every single wonderful, deep, well-catechized Catholic that I have ever worked with, mature in their faith, already self-aware, self-giving, clinging to sacramental life, often rosary prayers. I'm talking about people with deep wisdom. Have an underlying conviction, and you can sense it more than hear it. But it's true of many of them. In fact, I would say almost globally. They feel that God has set a low bar on their fulfillment, that they aren't much of anything special, and that's part of the cross they're asked to bear. that they're meant to be invisible and silent. That's what the enemy was trying to say to me. Listen, I was the gawky kid. I was shy growing up. It took me a long time. I'm a late bloomer. I am 63 years old. Took me a long time to blossom. And so anybody out there who's feeling like my life's a little gray, I hear other people's conversion stories or I see what they do and I think, God passed me over. I didn't get any of the fun stuff. But I promise you, if you prayerfully delve into your natural talents and meet God there and be repentant too, because as we'll hope we'll get to, some of these weaknesses lead us just kind of naturally into certain kinds of sins, areas of blindness, also just kind of certain kinds of selfishness that feel so natural to us that we don't know that that's what it is. And so believe me, if you were able to just kind of sit with them prayerfully and maybe with some guidance, find one of these great coaches like Curtis and Karen to step into them with you, to look at them together and to explore them and to personalize them, to say, this is true about me and that's true when, and tell a story and notice your feelings and notice the richness of opportunity to explore self there in the Holy Spirit. I promise you, God will blow your hair back. And what he shows you will blow your hair back. Someone out in the world might not think your calling to God, your mission, that you have to hold tight to his hand in order to achieve because it's going to be too big for you to do alone, and that's on purpose. But the other people might not see how special and beautiful and powerful your mission, but you will know it because your heart will be on fire. I promise you, God never wants any of us to live lukewarm.
Lisa, thank you. That's so moving. It's just remarkable how full of potential people are. And once you just peel back some of that dross and shine up the window a little bit, let some light in there, it's so exciting and it's deeply moving.
Thank you. And I feel that this is the enemy's most successful lie in the church, that we aren't anything special. And the thing is, of course, we don't want to be like, I'm so special and be all wrapped up in ourselves. We're not talking about narcissism here. We're talking about belovedness. And we're talking about what we believe about God. If we think he makes people that are nothing special and are never meant to experience the kind of profound joy that makes them courageous in carrying their crosses, in being that bright city on a hill that we're called to be, is that all lies? Well, no, that's the truth. But to know that truth, there's some looking inward. St. Teresa of Avila said the first room of the interior castle, the first step is self-knowledge. We got to have it, folks. We can't make assumptions, sweeping assumptions, because people have been telling us all our lives, you're this or you're that, or you're not this or you're not that, or that's a pipe dream, or that's not a holy dream. We want to ask God to sanctify all of our desires. Of course, that examination of conscience is important and a lifelong thing. But we can trust that he places in our hearts first the places he has gone ahead of us and is calling us to follow him.
So, Lisa, if let's say I'm a mom, I've been at home with my kids, maybe working, but not really in a career that I find very fulfilling or part-time or whatever. And my kids are leaving the home and getting into their own vocations. What's the role of all of this in helping me really discern this next phase of my life?
It's tremendous. It's like walking into a garden when you've been walking on pavement for years. You've been serving, sacrificing, putting a lot on hold. But the illusion is that you've been walking on pavement. God actually has these mysterious, sometimes invisible gardens we walk in for years while he's cultivating the soil and preparing us for what's next. So be assured, God is faithful. This is not just a bumper sticker. He is faithful. He never stopped cultivating your gifts. I love Romans 11:29. The gifts and the call of God are irrevocable. Can our gifts gather dust on a shelf? Sure. Sometimes we're caring for a sick person, or we've got littles, or whatever may be happening in our lives. It takes us away from that kind of personal fulfillment. But I promise you, God wastes nothing. All your gifts are there to be kind of dusted off, rediscovered. They're treasure houses. And he's been building up treasures in your soul, in your heart, in your mind that will allow those gifts now in this new season to have the kind of life that he ordains in this new anointing of your purpose in this season of life. So start to do the work. Whenever you are able to do this work and God attracts your heart to it, it's time. So God will help you to make space, help you to let go of what you need to let go of, to make space for what he wants to bring about that's new in your life. So I would say it's a game changer because you start to do this. It starts to sound a little like this. Oh, wow, I have that gift? Oh, that description actually reminds me of this and that. And you know what? When I was a kid, yes, I always loved that. Oh, that's so funny because my friend does this, or I know somebody who does that, and I've always been kind of envious of that. And you start to notice, and I don't mean that in a sinful sense, but oh, that appeals to me. I love that life or that kind of work or that mission or that apostolate or whatever it may be really has always attracted my heart. And sometimes you have no idea at first, but the more you delve and pray it through, the Lord starts to bring things to your mind. And it's really important at this point to be walking with a coach or somebody who can really be fully present to you, deeply listen, and to start to ask questions that help you go even deeper so that you can hear yourself say out loud things you've probably never said out loud to anyone before. Yes, I do love that. I have always thought that I would be a good, but that just always seemed so elusive, or whatever that might be. We start to, or maybe you already know, but just haven't had time for it. And the Lord shows you in your gifts, my gosh, I could do this uniquely through these gifts. They may not be the gifts that I thought I should have for this call, but if God is calling me to it, he's also going to call others to that vision. I'm not going to be alone. God assures us of that. We're a family. And so my gifts will matter in this calling. And I need to trust him and step out and start to let him lead. As my friend Chris McCluskey, who owns the Professional Christian Coaching Institute, where I trained and where I'm also on faculty, he loves to say, God more easily steers a moving boat. Think of a boat sitting with no wind in its sails. But if you allow yourself to start to catch a breeze and move, then that rudder starts to work. Then the Holy Spirit moves with you, and he will absolutely put the right people and the right experiences and opportunities before you at the right times. So I could go on and on.
Lisa, what about somebody who's feeling kind of locked in? Hey, I've got this job. I've got this family. Yeah, my kids, they're not as high maintenance as they were, but I work at, JP Morgan. I work at Menards. I'm a doctor. I'm a mechanic. I got a few years till retirement, like quite a few. What's really the point? I mean, doing strengths, that's not going to help me, right? Because I'm locked in.
I would say locked in is an illusion because God is a God of life and new beginnings in every moment. His mercies are new every morning. We hear in Lamentations 3. And so let's say I'm in a career and it's a really good career. I'm not really fulfilled by it, but I'm good at it, right? And it pays the bills and the kids are getting through college and it's going to be a long time before I can rest. And I'm probably not going to jump this track anytime soon. So what's the point? Well, we start with just understanding self and with false beliefs about self, false shame crumbling away, so that in our interactions with the people we love, we start to see ourselves more clearly. We start to see them more clearly because we understand our own giftings, weaknesses, places where we're always going to need help and encouragement. We start to be able to do that for others. And maybe we start to look into their gifts too. That's a game changer in relationships, marriages, teams, and so on. But what happens? Everything shifts because we let more of God's love in when we contemplate what he has made. And when we bring it before him and ask him to bless it and redeem it, we start to see areas where we haven't been living fully. Maybe it does mean we start to go, okay, well, I always did love to paint or take pictures. Maybe I'm just going to start to carve out some time to do a little of that and just start to feed that part of my being so I don't feel so burned out. We start to understand our needs. We can start to achieve a little bit of balance. And it might be something as simple as just needing more alone time, or needing more social life, or whatever that might be that's woven into us. But God meets us in those needs, and they're critical because we can really become self-sufficient. We can think it's all up to us and that there is no way to get off the track. But that's not God's way. And he is not going to do anything to crash your life. He's not going to say, okay, quit being a doctor right now and just go be a street artist while your family can't eat. That's never going to happen. Your vocation is going to be first in the Lord. And so we can trust him. We can trust in his gentleness to bring new life and new freedom. I just got done coaching a married couple, two physicians. I'm working with someone who's in a psychiatry program and almost finished. I've worked with physicists and other really advanced people, and many of them were dissatisfied with where they were for lots of reasons. And one guy who had a really big job in cybersecurity, once he started to know himself better, started in this, he's a really young guy, brilliant guy with a lot of responsibility, management, and so many reports too, and a lot of pressure. When he started to be more himself, everything changed. He started to see where he needed to step up in his job, where he needed to let other people operate more freely in his job, what kinds of options he could offer to his boss so that he had clear communication. He stepped into his own being. This was a really successful young guy making a lot of money with a lot of status who was having very low satisfaction in his life. And now he's so excited that it frees up all this creative energy, and he starts to innovate a product of his own on the side and to seek investors and all that. So what I'm trying to say to you is that allowing who God says you are and what you need to free you up to do some exploration, to let go a lot of the false negatives. That doesn't mean you're not looking at your actual sins, but false negatives about who you are and what your talents are that maybe we've put aside because there's false shame attached to them or woundedness of some kind. It can take so many forms. When you start to live more comfortably in your own skin, oh my goodness, life just is so much more a work of God. Something tender, something beautiful, something that becomes a new adventure every day. And I mean that because it's God, not because it's Clifton Strengths or any other assessment, but because God is in there, and discovering him and the truth of who you are is critical.
Lisa, you mentioned something about weaknesses earlier in the conversation. Let's circle back to that. Tell me more about that.
Okay, yeah. Because when I was describing my strengths and how affirming it was in my passions, and it helped me to live out my mission with a lot more confidence, the flip side of that is that, oh my goodness, my top strength makes me an oversharer, overtalker. I can be an unbelievable bore. And I am not even kidding. I have a whole podcast episode on this. That's my input, my natural researcher and sharer. I can really overshare. My second one is connectedness, which made me think all this time because I love people. I need them. I feel connected to the global family, and I love bringing people together. But I was made to feel that I was needy growing up. I was told that I was needy. And so I felt uncomfortable with how much I needed human relationships, but actually I'm gifted there. And so that will lead us into another subject down the line, but we can have a lot of false shame in those areas of weaknesses because we don't understand the strong part. It's like women tend to be, I'll just use this as an example because it can simplify things, tend to be stronger in their lower body than they're in their upper body. Not for all women, but it's often true. And so if we spent all of our time at the gym just working on our upper body and not developing where we're naturally strong, our body would never find its natural balance. Of course, you want to strengthen the whole thing as best you can, but you don't over-focus on the areas of weakness. You find how to use what God has given you that's strong, and then it compensates for the weaknesses. But knowing your weaknesses is critical. So another one of mine is activator. That's the ready, fire, aim talent. Gallup calls it the let's go talent. I can get myself up to my eyeballs in overcommitment, not doing anything well and dropping balls. If I don't understand that person who can ignite others into action, who can inspire people to move forward, can also be the person who creates a train wreck, who can be overly impulsive. And because I have woo a few lines down, that winning others over thing, I like to meet people all the time. I want to trust everyone too quickly and be overly transparent. I've gotten hurt a lot because of that. Like, we really have to understand that the wheels can come off this sports car at high speed. It can wipe out. And it's not the end of the world. God is with us and all of that. I don't mean to be frightening about this. I just mean that anytime you see someone else with a gift, you're also seeing someone with inherent weaknesses and someone with inherent blind spots. There was a time, and I just confessed this on my podcast, there was a time when I was oversharing all the time without realizing it and watching my family's eyes glaze over, and I judged them as being selfish. I was not leaving a lot of air in the room for other people to talk or think or share or just even have some quiet. because I was so excited about so many things and an activator and connectedness. And I mean, I was running amok. And I didn't realize how selfish that was. But I spent a decent period of time, a number of years, thinking other people were being selfish with me, that they weren't open to what was driving me, what was exciting and a passion to me. So in discovering the weaknesses and the blind spots, not only do we know what to confess and work on, we can bring them before the Lord and ask Him to redeem them and turn them into something beautiful. Enhance our awareness not only of self, but of others, to see the grace opportunities that are there in that weakness. And also, once we start to notice the strengths of others, hey, I'm naturally weak in that area. For my podcast, I have somebody who does certain things that are draining and horrible for me that I never get around to, and it takes me too long if I try. So that person is really lit up with all that tech stuff. It makes him happy. He does it in a tiny fraction of the time I would do it. So knowing that weakness, I know where to call on someone else's strength. And that's part of that communion of saints. We're all meant to carry kind of different things, right? The parts of the body. Look at Ephesians 4 and the different callings. Well, St. Paul talks about this a lot. So we are a body of Christ with many parts, unique, distinct, as the Catechism says, unique and unrepeatable. But with those strengths also come weaknesses, and understanding them makes us more compassionate to ourselves and to others. Makes us wiser.
Wow. I'm really intrigued by what you mentioned a couple times here, Lisa, this, what did you call it? The shame or displaced shame around both strengths and weaknesses. I'm wondering if you could say a few more words about that.
Yeah. Some of the clients that I've had, I can't tell you how many people I've had that come in that have these amazing strengths that I wish I had. Discipline, consistency, and focus. These are people who are like laser beams. When they commit to doing something, you really can't shake them off it, and they get it done and they do it beautifully. They're people who can create regularity and habits. These are the people who get up at 5 a.m. every day to go to the gym. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is so not me.
I do know people like that.
Yeah, exactly. But I've had 3 clients high in those gifts come to me kind of quietly confessing that they thought they had OCD. They carried such shame. They're trying to hide the fact that they dotted every I, crossed every T, took copious notes, communicated with great clarity to their teams. I had a guy who was giving me permission to talk about it, a diocesan youth ministry and young adult ministry leader who always set beautiful best practices for his team, and everything was planned out to the nines and always taking notes and bullet pointing conversations. And he'd been hiding his OCD for years, never diagnosed by a doctor. This was just his own diagnosis, and was so ashamed of it. It had such heaviness for him. When he started to understand his gifts, the scales fell from his eyes. He experienced new freedom, and his bishop asked him, within days of this discovery and stepping into feeling confident for the first time. This is a really accomplished guy, very respected guy, confident for the first time because he suddenly saw, oh, these are gifts. This isn't an embarrassment. This isn't disorder. This is God's blessing on my life. These are the things I love to do. Right after that, his bishop called him up and asked him to create best practices for youth ministry for the whole diocese. God confirmed it. And I've seen countless stories like that where one of their highest gifts was creating shame for them, where they thought it was a weakness or something to be embarrassed about. But when they could look at it more closely, understand it better, and then hear a little bit of reframing back about what it is they do and how they show up for people, they start to realize, oh, wait a minute, that's not shameful at all. That's actually brave. That's actually shows values underneath the way I operate. I may not do it always perfectly, but boy, that's a good thing. God called it good, and now I can call it good.
Wow, what an inspiring example to go from shame and fear to embracing your gifts and have confidence. And boy, that makes all the difference. We can't get anything done, really, anything important done without other people. And they need to look in our eyes and see that, yeah, we're ready. We're ready to step up and give it our best. And with shame, and Karen, you mentioned, I think, the fear. I think there is some fear around, fear of failure. You have your gifts, or what have you encountered in this area, Lisa?
Yeah, it's very common, as we know, especially people who have a lot of kind of passion in their nature. they can have a lot of fear too, because God will sometimes show any of us really in lots of different ways a bigger picture, a greater possibility, maybe something that seems a little audacious to us. And so we have that fear of trying, of stepping into it. We don't always trust in God's faithfulness. And that's our own just human weaknesses, coming into play. But it's also the enemy getting into our heads, right? God won't actually be there if you step out. Last year, I felt God was calling me to do something which I've been researching and meeting with people and processing for several months now, but slowly moving. But when he first asked it of me, I was like, oh, no. I mean, I really, really freaked out because it's something I really wanted to do, but I was absolutely certain it was going to crash my marriage, my health, that I was just going to have a nervous breakdown because it was too much for me. And so I kept bringing it to prayer. And at a certain point, I felt he said to me, I love your marriage. Why would I hurt your marriage? Why would I ask something of you and hurt you? I'm here with you. I will show you. Will you pace with me? Will you take this as I show it to you? And so he won me over. I started I had to get some coaching myself. I have a couple of coaches myself. I had to get some coaching to hear my fears out loud. I wasn't even sure what they were until I talked it through with someone on a deeper level and went, yeah, I'm scared that this is going to happen and that's going to happen. This feels like too much for me. But God does that. And so we have to believe if he's asking this of me, then it's good. It will make me more holy. It will bless my vocation. It will teach me greater humility because I'll have to depend on him every step of the way. He will use my gifts and talents because that's what he made. He didn't make it just to cast it aside and ignore it. He's not a wasteful God. And so I would just say, as far as the fear goes, know that it's normal, perfectly normal, and talk it through. I'm always, of course, a big proponent of coaching, but if you have someone who really deeply listens to you, get your fears out. Once they're out, that big gorilla that's in your being becomes kind of a little squeaky monkey. You can look at it more objectively. You can kind of separate from the fear a little bit, maybe even write it down, pray over it, and take your time with that. When you're dealing with fear, it usually has something to do with just needing a little nurture, needing a little support, knowing that you're not going to be alone in something.
Lisa, this has been just tremendously inspiring for me to listen to the beautiful way that you talk about who we are in God and who we're made to be. I just really appreciate you being here with us and sharing with our audience. I think it's a great topic for them to really reflect on more, and to take some of these steps that you've indicated would be really helpful. I'm wondering if you would just share with us before we close just a little more about where people can find you and what you do. And I know Curtis mentioned you have a little mini podcast. So would you be willing to do that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thanks for everyone who's been listening and attending to this conversation. God bless you. Yeah, you can find me at wonderfullymade139.com, and that's where you'll find my podcast. I also did a 12-part, what I call a TV series, a little video series with some in-depth interviews at the intersection of faith and talent. And the little micro podcast is Talent Talk Tuesdays. If you're interested in coaching or coach training from a Catholic perspective, you can also reach out to me there. I'd love to speak with you. We can have a nice discovery call, a nice relaxed conversation. My gosh, it's been so much fun talking with both of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here with us. The Catholic Midlife Podcast is for anyone that wants to receive the abundance of life that God has for each one of us. Take a moment right now to tell a friend about us.